Today my goal is to try to trace down that errant switch issue that we have, and what keeps the lights on the dash of the RD on all the time. I think it's the switch. It might be a wiring connection. I made a little chart and I'm going to try to trace that down at some point in the day. But the first thing I want to do is take the bikes and get them run up. I like to run them up at least once a month. It's just for my benefit, and I like to just know that that oil is circulating and all that moisture is blown out of the exhaust. Today's the day we do our once a month, I guess every 3 weeks, once a month. Take all the bikes outside and run them a little bit. Let them come up to operating temperature. It's a lot of fun. Oh, they love being run in this cold weather. Get rid of all that moisture in the exhaust. Look at that moisture coming out of the SCR. Woo! Sounds like Bomber Command when they're all running at the same time. Anyway, this is what I do at least once a month in the winter. Got to get the rest of them out now. So this worked out pretty good today. I've got some of them run inside, some of them run outside, but they're all ready to go. Now all we need is weather. Now this might be trickier than I thought it would be. I don't know yet. We're going to find out. But I did make this on a previous video, and I hope that this is going to simplify the process. But as usual, first I have to have my coffee and warm up a little bit and come back out here to the tundra. And it's just my habit to run all the bikes at least once a month in the cold weather. Try to pick a day that it's not super cold, and today fits that bill, and a day that we're not going to have a lot to do. It should be a pretty cut and dry thing once I get that done, I hope. Boy, every one of these jobs is an I hope. You never know. Once I pull the side off that engine, you never know what mice can jump out at you. Now, I know not everybody agrees with this run the bikes once a month thing. Well, I don't know, and I don't pretend to know. But I do know that when we did, Dallas probably knows more about it than I do, when we did have our 1947 Air Coupe, and that aircraft was run up, and we used to take turns going down the airport and propping it over and running it every couple of weeks in the cold weather. And there's probably counterpoints within counterpoints, but once you do it and you get in the habit of doing it, it seems like the noble thing to do. It's time to get working on our RD. Now, there's no way I'm going to get a chance to work on this today because I don't have a big enough time window. Today is not going to be a day that I have a lot of a time window. So what I'm going to try to do here is I'm trying to figure out, I wanted to get that switch taken care of. That's a relatively small job. I have another small job, and I want to share this with people. See how this is all rotted and cracked and everything? Well, you know what? I'm going to get a new one. Of course, these are only about 20 bucks at Harbor Freight, but I wanted to keep this one for a spare. So what I'm going to do is clean up, just etch this whole area and fill that with JB Weld and see if it holds up. Now, believe it or not, this stool has served me well for probably 10 years or so. A long time anyway. And I really actually should have an extra one anyway. So this is going to force me to, it's going to force me to do what I should have done years ago, is have two of these. Now, it's funny to say this, but this is one of the tools. You don't think you really need this until the day you don't have it. And I know today we're going to need it. I'm going to be using it, well, every day out in that cold garage I use it, but anyway, I had, this is one of the things, I don't even think this needs JB Weld. I'm just going to leave the bolts on it. This is something I was just wondering if I'd have to take it up to Luciano's and weld it. He's got a welder, of course, but I think the I put 3 bolts in here. Oh my gosh, stronger than new. And that might be a good idea to do that. Actually, I'm going to put some black paint in there because that was rusting pretty good in there. So, and we always try to make these things upgraded if we can. So as I'm doing this and I'm cleaning this up so the paint might stick a little bit, that'll keep that from rusting. And remember, this is out in a damp garage all the time, never comes down the cellar. So no, just like the motorcycles, you know, that I like to keep the exhaust as well, the whole bike. And I know Carlos Serra has a friend that owns 3 Ferraris, and he's a fanatic about all winter. Last time we had pizza with him, he went on and on and on about how important it is to, he starts them and lets them come up to operating temperature and then drives them around a little bit at least once a month. And he's got a lot invested there. Anyway, I'm going to throw some paint on that and we'll be good to go. Another good reason, anytime you take something apart, never throw the bolts away. It always saves your bacon having extra bolts. You know what you're probably thinking, the reason he broke this, too many Christmas cookies. And you might be right. Well, Karen kind of thinks you're right too. Anyway, we just happen to have some, this is the paint we were using to do that little plastic tab on the radar detector. Don't have to make this fancy, that's for sure, but I'd like it not to rust. And for sure we'll be getting a new one, and this will now be our spare. Yeah, that worked out pretty good. One small step for man, one more seat for mankind. Now every once in a while I find something that really works well for me, probably would work well for you too if you have aches and pains. What I have had in the past, I have had 2, actually I've had 1 on each side, torn rotator cuffs from various things we don't need to go into. Foolishness of youth, let's leave it at that, and dirt bikes. So anyway, Dallas sent me this. It's a rice bag. It's filled with rice. And what you do, you nuke it for a minute, minute and a half, whatever, and you put it on whatever area. Now in my case, I have a bad elbow from, I will not mention what the reason is. And I didn't realize what this was going to be good for. In the morning, when I get up in the morning, I put it in a nuke while I'm having my cereal. Just put it around my neck and it warms. It actually warms the muscle. This has worked so well. I'm shocked. I've been in correspondence with Dallas of how good this worked. And since a lot of people have had injuries from whatever, wherever it hurts, heat always helps. It brings blood to an area. Another thing, and I know a lot of people don't know this, I did speak to Jose about this. He was, and maybe it wasn't Jose, but he was using Australian Dream. Well, I found this stuff, the person that worked on my back, I had back therapy for I think 9 or 10 months. They recommended I use this. As soon as I went for therapy, I bought a case of this, and this is just amazing. Now it's amazing to me. If you have, let's say that's the sore area, it's like deodorant. You put that on, and 5 minutes later you got some pain relief. And now it's really good for me riding a motorcycle, because a lot of times I get up in the morning and my elbow, the bad elbow is bad. I just put Biofreeze on it. I put this on my neck now every morning. It's a good way when you get old to deal with pain and not get that you turn into a jellyfish. You stay active. And I've been working on trying to figure a way to get the radar detector to mount to both the RD and the GS. I don't have a radar detector, a way of putting it on the gas caps they have. But I've had some ideas. They haven't come to fruition yet. And I have had a couple of people ask me, how do you put that on a GS? Well, I'm working on it, but I don't have it figured out yet. And I always make sure all my waxes and polishes are inside when it's below freezing like this, but we got to head out and see if we can fix that switch. So the way this day is playing out, as unpredictable as it always is, it's raining like a storm. There'll be definitely no painting today, so this will be a good choice to do this work on the RD. And I guess I should be thankful it's rain and not snow, but they want to get working on the RD. Now the first thing, as I get started here, I got to pull a side off the engine. Relatively simple thing. I've laid out a clean towel so I can lay the parts out in the sequence they come off. No real special reason to do that, other than it just makes it convenient. Now, it feels like it was a good investment to get this stool before I go over tea kettle here. Oh, you never know. Anyway, that's one thing. I'm going to get another one, of course. But getting this apart, this side comes right off, no big deal. But tracing down the wire or replacing the switch, and I still don't know, actually I still don't know what the culprit is here. We're going to find out very soon. And when we do, one way or another, we'll share what we learned today. I'm not sure, but that's the case every day. There's never 2 days the same, and when you have old motorcycles, there's always plenty of time to learn. It's a learning experience. Now at this part, all the screws are a different length. So what I'm very cautious of doing, I try to line the screws up in the order they come out. I'll start with this screw and work my way around counterclockwise. But then all the screws that are different lengths, they should, when I go to put it back together, I can just reverse that. Just makes it a little bit easier. And of course I've replaced, they make a beautiful kit for RDs that replaces all those Phillips head screws with these Allen head screws. It just makes it a lot easier when you have to work on a bike. Well, the first thing is to get this shifter off. That just makes it the easy first step to do. Get this off and we'll be ready to pull side cover. And one of the things, every one of these bolts is a different length. So if you don't keep them in sequence, yeah, you can still figure it out, but just makes it a little bit easier if you lay them out in sequence. And let's see, yeah, we can do it this way. Usually I do it counterclockwise, I may as well do it this way. So the next thing I have to do is just disconnect the clutch down here at the cable, and that's going to allow me to release the cable, take that piece off, and that'll make working on this side of the engine just a little more convenient. Now, since part of this job is what I want to do is I want to clean everything up, and anything that's really dull I can go run it over on a polishing wheel again. But taking this apart, as you can expect, it's got a lot of years of grit and grease in it. We'll get rid of all that. We'll clean it up to better than new. Okay, now once that piece is out, now I can release the cable conveniently, and this will all come apart. So right now, getting this piece off and getting the cable through there. That allows that to come through. We have the cable off. We'll clean this up and lube it and get the cable out, clean that, lube it. Now I know some of my compadres that do this kind of work are not in favor of or think it's worth doing all this extra little cleanup. Well, it's a personal thing, that's for sure. And a little bit of diesel fuel, 2 minutes, and I'll have all the grit cleaned off it, and I'll have some brand new wheel bearing grease put where it's appropriate. It'll just make for a lot nicer clutch pull and hopefully a lot more reliable motorcycle. In fact, I ought to take these screws out. Anything I can do to clean things up at this point, this is the whole thing, is just working on these motorcycles. When they're clean and half polished and half clean, it's reasonable. When they're a filthy, rusty mess, oh my God, it's horrible. But we try to make the most out of whatever comes our way, that's for sure. Even a small part like this, just the cleanup itself, it's not that big of a deal. And when it's all back together, you think you're going to have many, many years where you don't have to work on it again, but just makes it's nice for me knowing that it's clean in there. Anyway, we get the rest of this goop off of here. There's some real garbage on this. I didn't think this was going to be that dirty. Now, one of the reasons it's worth doing this, in my opinion, and getting in all the nooks and crannies and getting everything cleaned out, because basically when you need a part for a bike that's more than 40 years old, I think it's 44 now, and what happens is the parts you would buy if they're used off eBay, some of them are worse than the ones you have. So, and a lot of them you can buy new, or some of these reproduction parts that I've bought, not quite as good as the real Yamaha parts, but when you have a real Yamaha part, I think it's worth keeping, that's for sure. Now in this case, this is a small thing. Greasing these parts with nice fresh grease after they've been cleaned. All small little details, but in the end, I think it all pays. And when you pull a clutch in and it's nice and smooth, and sometimes when it needs a restoration, every time you pull a clutch in, it's gritty, it feels like it's in sand. Well, sometimes this is the reason. And it's a little thing, but then this whole, everything about the bikes, it's small little details. And once we get this back, there we are. Boy, oh my God, that's so nice and smooth. Beautiful. That will add a little enjoyment for sure to riding the bike. Now I have these parts all pulled apart, relatively clean. Even this little grommet up here, I'd like to get some grease on it. Every little thing, every little detail, it all adds up. The problem is, when it goes the other way, it all adds up too, and it gets gritty, and it gets sloppy, and it gets hard to deal with. And I'm going to put some grease in by the ball, the little ball that goes. This is part of the lever, the action. Anything you can do to make it smoother and nicer just makes the riding of a bike more enjoyable. And a small part like that, even that, it all adds up. Now cleaning this up is going to be a labor-intensive thing for sure, but I'm willing to pay the price because I want to have that area in there as clean as possible, and I also want to have the matching area where the counter sprocket is when I'm done with this job to be as clean as possible too. And before I can really clean this up as thoroughly as I'd like, I got to take the access little panel off. That'll allow me to get in there and get some more of that grit off. One of the things I would love to have in the future is a cleaning tank, but I just don't have the room for it here. And in reality, I wouldn't use it that much, but it would be handy to have. So, some future, we may be getting one. Alright, so that takes care of that. I've got the good gasket in there. Nothing to clean up on this. Put the screws with it. And we're ready to clean that part up. That's going to be a labor of love. So step one on this is just soak it with diesel fuel. Let it sit here for a while I clean up some of the other parts. And the diesel fuel does its magic. Doesn't take long. But again, this is all just a labor of love. That's all it is. And there's always so much goop in by the chain. And as you can imagine, this just becomes a labor of love. Clean all that goop up. When we're all done, we'll clean it with compressed air, take it outside, and just blow all this crap out behind the garage. But eventually, it'll come out. It just takes time. And in there, I'll have to get in there with a little screwdriver. There actually is a little grease fitting in there. I want to get all clean grease in there and get that all cleaned out. A labor of love. Now, I've already spent so much time in the past cleaning this, polishing it. These parts were black when I bought the bike, by the way. Oh, it reminds me just how much fun this was in the very beginning. But anyway, we've got it cleaned up now to where, and if you bought this stuff off eBay, it wouldn't be any better. It probably wouldn't be even as good. So to me, I treasure these old parts. I try to maintain them. I try to encourage other people to maintain them as best you can, because this is the history of motorcycling here, when men were men. Yeah, the next step is to get some diesel fuel, get some dirty rags underneath the motorcycle, get some diesel fuel and compressed air in there, and try to clean that out as best we can. Now it's really messy in there, and a lot of it you can just dig out with a screwdriver, but this is all part of getting this job, because the switch that I want to access is right behind the countershaft sprocket. So getting this clean would be job one. A lot of it, see, I'm trying to get the big chunks out with a screwdriver just to make it a little bit easier. Ah, there it comes. The diesel fuel works wonders, and all you got to do, just keep after it. Diesel fuel's cheap enough. Once we get this all cleaned up, then we can start to look at what we actually are doing this job for, trying to figure out why that neutral light never goes off, and if that switch is bad, if we can replace it, check it. We won't know until we get this clean. So at this point, I've got most of the grease, I'd say 99% of it off of there. This is really a mess. I'm glad I have all these old towels. But now the thing is, the switch that's in there has silicone all over it. So I assume at one point in time it was leaking. Somebody just put, maybe it was me, put silicone on it. But I can still get in at the wire. But I don't know now the next step on this. I don't know how this is going to play out. Now, because I'm not a genius with electricity, maybe not even a beginner, now I can at least access the switch. If I have to, I'll pull a generator apart. But I have to see if, because this, Luciano and I had worked on the generator. We had pulled it apart. And it seemed like in that time window, that's when this went bad. So I'm thinking somewhere down in there, that blue wire, that sky blue wire is part of the reason this is a problem. But I don't know. But again, I'm handicapped right now. I can only do the mechanical part of it to the best of my ability. This electrical part, this is going to be a challenge. Now, I don't really know if this is going to tell me anything, but I can assume this is the generator part of this, and I can assume all that's going to tell me is if the wire is good or the wire is bad. If I touch that, in fact, there we go. It's not really going to tell me much. It's just going to tell me the wire is okay. It's not even going to tell me if the switch is, the switch is okay. But I don't know what, I think maybe what I really have to do is scrape all that silicone away and just replace the switch and hope that that's what it is. And if it isn't that, then I've got to remove the generator and get in. Well, I've got to remove the generator anyway to get at that wire. So I may as well remove the generator first. Now, I'm just trying to play the odds in my not knowing exactly, and of course everybody knows, don't even think about following my advice on anything electric. There may be a dime, and this may be that I have to call in the Marines here, but I'll give it my best shot first. Now, pulling this generator off is really annoying, because when you're done, I'll have to reset or check. I'll just verify it, and luckily I just happen to have Luciano's dial indicator here. I don't want to disturb the timing on the bike, and when you pull this off, you run the risk of maybe doing that, and it could happen. But there's screws that hold the generator on. Oh boy, I think we're going to have to get the impact driver for this. Yeah, we are. Oh my God, impact driver time. Oh my God, those things are tight. Luciano, you're a lot stronger than I am. Well, he's younger. He's 7 years younger too, so he's cheating. Already I caught him cheating. Oh, okay. So I'm just going to break these with the, I actually don't have to use the hammer on the impact driver, which is good. But, okay. And this is for sure a time when it would really be nice to have a helper. It may be that I've got to jump ship here and get a helper, get somebody to come over, but well, let's see. I want to take this off. At least, even if I have to make this into a 2-day video, what's going to happen here is I've got the dirty, nasty work done of cleaning this up. And it's that switch, because it's all covered with silicone. I assume that nylon piece, they were probably prone to crack. And so, well, it's not like it's a big deal to reset the timing on this, but I was hoping I wouldn't have to do it. I hoped wrong. Okay, here we go. Now I can look inside, but I'm not sure I'm going to see anything that well, with the whole thing apart, I don't see any loose wires hanging in there, but I guess the one thing I could do is a continuity check on that switch, because I need to know if that switch is connected to the generator, so I guess that would be the first thing to test here. So this is the whole point of this whole video, and this is what I learned the hard way, is it was not the switch at all. And I put the shifter on and put it in gear with the generator apart, and it looked like the generator right here, where that blue wire goes in, When Luciano and I put this back together, and we did it together, we pinched that wire right there, and I can see that there's a little break, but the wire is fine. It was grounding onto the ground of the alternator. So by pinching that wire, that was the whole culprit. So I don't need to do the switch, and actually this is good news. And I've been able to put it in gear and shut the light out at will, but that was the culprit right there, and that's a good lesson to learn. If you ever take the alternator apart, make sure that wire, because that wire is, well, it's 44 years old, and it's brittle, and I don't see any connector on it. See, the one Luciano sent me has a connector. There's no connector, so I would have to put a joint in the wire. That would be a real problem. So I'm going to have to be real careful putting this back together that I don't pinch that wire. And then what I'll do is I'll check it. I put the shifter on just temporarily and see if that all plays out. And if that plays out, that I can shut the light on and off, well, I'll go to church. So here's our neutral light, and I can shut it off now. Neutral, first gear, neutral, second. Okay. So again, that's something you can pick up off the video, and I guess anybody working on old bikes, if the neutral light doesn't go off and you have a similar setup, just trace that wire in and see if it's grounding out on the edge of the alternator. That is a tip worth its weight in kerosene. Look how much kerosene we use cleaning these parts. But anyway, the rest of this should be relatively easy. We got most of the stuff's cleaned up. I want to run it on a buffing wheel a little bit before I put it back, but just to clean it up. But my whole day is complete right now. Now I know I can go take a coffee break, and we're over the hump. Well, we're in the nice warm house taking a break. I was hoping this afternoon that the rain would let up or stop. I'd be able to get some paint on this, but not going to risk it. It's coming out too nice. So glad we got that figured out. And by the way, that's a great tip. A great tip if you're a backyard mechanic like I am. And if you work on, let's say you take the front wheel off the bike and all of a sudden the speedometer doesn't work, look at the cable going to the front wheel. Look at where the things that go to the last thing you worked on. And Vince, I know Vince will be impressed. Vince, these electrical issues, I still wish you lived next door. Good time to take a coffee break, and after that coffee is brewing, we will be absolutely ready to put that baby back together. Now, one other thing while we're doing RD work, and I haven't forgotten, in fact, Bill, I have your note on my shop wall that Bill graciously, and it's a fellow I've never met, he graciously sent me, when he knew I had a bad kickstand on the RD, he sent me a spare, and we'll be installing that. I wanted to refinish it and clean it all up, make it better than new. And we'll be doing that very soon. Looks like more rain is coming in, but we had a good coffee break, and I'm ready to attack again. Hey, I need another gallon of diesel fuel here, but boy, oh boy, am I happy to find out that that is it. I don't even need the switch. I'm ready to go back to work. And again, that's a wonderful tip, but when you're working, and you're working under conditions here where it's below freezing most of the time, that is an issue. That's something that I'm sure nobody's at fault. We just want to do the best we possibly can. And thank you, Luciano, for all your help over the years. But now, what I'm going to do is, and this is another good tip, once I put this back together, I know I'm going to have to retime it, or I'll just check the timing, one or the other. It's very easy to do. And what I really want to do, most of all, then before I go any further, I'll check that I can put it in gear and that the light goes out. And this was annoying. It never stopped me from riding the bike, but it was still annoying. It's not going to be annoying after today, though. What's going to be annoying is cleaning up. And then the assembly should be a piece of cake. Now the real trick will be to see if you can get this back in without pinching the wire, and which we will be very, very careful. I tucked that wire back in, and I think that was just an oversight on our part the first time we took this apart, but again, if it was easy, everybody'd own 10 RDs. And the test is complete. We are in great shape. Now, since we're done with the cleanup, I want to get that diesel fuel out into a milk bottle and get it out into our recycle program where we dump the oil. The town, luckily, our town of Rutherford has a recycle program for all these chemicals. We don't have to pollute the world with it. Okay, as we're putting this back together, it gets a little, you gotta be careful not to get the horse ahead of the cart. That's got to go in there. We've got to get our assembly on with the cable attached. Once that's on, we can put this down in there. It is easier to get the screws in if you back out the little nylon piece just a little bit. Once that's on all the way, and that's down all the way, get both of the screws tightened up and put the spring on, and we're done here. A little dab of grease on a cable and on a linkage on all of this stuff, and a little bit down on there. And we are ready for the moment of truth. And we should have a real nice, well, better than what it was. The clutch pull, that's for sure. That back in there. And from this point on, just putting those screws back, torquing everything down. Get the shifter back on. I always try to go through this in my head, what I have to do. Now, I had originally started thinking if I got done early today, I'd pull all these parts and spend some time doing a real good polishing on them, but this job took way longer than I thought it would. But I'm very happy that it's done, believe me. I'm not unhappy whatsoever about this. This really worked out good, and I think there's good information on this video. Something you can put in the bank too. Always remembering, if you work on something and something goes wrong, start with the last thing you worked on, because usually that's stuff. And how do I know that? Okay, now button up the rest of this side of the engine. And then we got to check the timing. Now, you probably don't, but I want to do it anyway because I still have Luciano's dial indicator here, so it'll be... And we've already made a dedicated video on using a dial indicator, so no point putting that on a video again and again and again. Now, another really good trick. When you're putting the shifter on, these splines on an RD and on a lot of Japanese bikes are really fine splines, tend to get damaged easily. So with the bolt out, I pound in a screwdriver. That allows it to slide on a lot easier than if you just try to take a hammer and beat on it. That is a really good tip too for putting a shifter on and off. So I hope in the course of doing this whole thing you've picked up a couple of good tips, but I am super happy to have found that that's the problem and that it's not the switch. And when I looked at that switch and it had all the silicone seal in it, I thought, oh, and then maybe that's not the right exact switch or something. This turned out to be really good. And again, we do have the dial indicator video, and that does take time to do it, but it's well worth it. And thank you, Luciano, for loaning me the dial indicator. I don't have my own. I borrowed his. And the final thing is to check it with a timing light. Just make sure. That's a double check within a double check. Now we still have extra oil in that fuel, and while it's running on choke, boy does it smoke. What a day this has been, smoky garage and all. The final thing is the little grease fittings that are on this bike. So it has the look of this whole episode has been because of that pinched wire, and I think that's just great information to know if you have an old bike and there's just no end to the work. It's a labor of love. There's no other way you can describe this. And you either like it or you don't like it, and that's the end of it. And there's always good little tricks that make it a little more easier to do, a little more interesting, a little more fun. But the bottom line is we don't have a day we can test ride this. The fun will be to get a test ride. Now, we can't really do any jetting because it's in the mid-30s now. When you jet a two-stroke in the mid-30s, but we got rid of the surging, the pilot jets work, and doing the fine-tuning on the needle and the main jet. That's coming on a future video. And we also have, I was going to do it today, I was going to polish this whole side of the engine up while I had it apart. We just ran out of time, but since I'm going to do the one on the GS in the very near future, I'm going to do a repolish on the GS. This is just good. I'll wipe it down with a little bit of the Meguiar's and we'll be good to go. And whenever I'm done working on this, I always think, wow, how nice it is that here we are 44 years after this bike was manufactured. And we're going to still get to ride it as soon as we get some weather. And I have had some really thrilling rides. I've had some memorable rides. And I've had rides of burning hole in pistons and all part of the adventure. The great adventure of two-stroke motorcycles. Who would want to go to their grave without it? So we have other mods we're going to be doing. I want to do that kickstand. That's another thing. I wanted to refinish it. And as soon as I'm doing something else, I want to work on Luciano's bike, but not when the weather's like today. And I'm glad we got this one out of the way. We got this off the list for now, but there's still so many more things I want to do. And that's the thing with all these old motorcycles. The maintenance is ongoing. The modifications are ongoing. The fun is ongoing. And maybe you don't share that passion. Maybe you do. If you're watching this video, maybe you do. I don't know. But it's sure a passion that has captivated me my whole life. So before I end this video, I want to thank the healthcare workers. Wow. And thank Luciano for the help he's been with this and every project. And I'm sure when I call him and tell him we got that resolved, because these are the kind of things, if somebody else has a similar problem, they can share the information. And there isn't, I don't think a week goes by, I don't find something on YouTube that's so good and so interesting. Shutting off check engine lights, fixing refrigerator, cutting glass shower doors. There's no end to it. And thank you every one of the guys that shares that information. And I want to thank Scott. Scott shared some critical Suzuki information with us. I've got pictures to share in the future of his motorcycle that he restored, his 250. And he shared some really quality information that we all can use. All the people on the A-Team, actually all the 9,000 subscribers, whoever's watching this video, but keeping this guy running is one of my primary goals, and it's finicky, and it's always a little bit of a problem, and it's always a little bit annoying, and and at the end of the day, you get out on a block, and I look for an open road and go through the gears, and I forget all about this maintenance. I don't even care about it. And then I go buy another gallon of two-stroke oil, and I know I'm addicted. Anyway, I want to thank you for watching the video. That's the crux of it. We enjoy sharing it. I enjoy editing it. I hope you enjoy watching it. Share it with your friends if you find it interesting. And thanks so much for watching. And we do try to post up something every day, almost every day. We do try to share the information. We do try to share the passion for all motorcycling, and especially for older bikes. So once again, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching.